Blue and red strobe spilled across my hydrangeas while a 14-year-old in basketball shorts shouted into his phone with Oscar-level urgency. "He has barricaded himself." The kid roared at what sounded like a very unimpressed dispatcher on speaker. The barricade, of course, was a 6-foot cedar privacy gate that I had locked. My gate, my lock, on my property? Because apparently I prefer my yard not to function as a neighborhood recreation area. The responding officer took one look, slid the latch open, clacked it twice like he was testing a pen, then turned toward the kid with the sort of exhausted patience only veteran patrol officers possess. "Son," he said in a flat monotone, "this is how gates work." The kid tried to argue, but the officer raised a hand and asked to speak with the property owner. "That would be me," I said, already standing on my porch with a cup of coffee, observing this circus unfold across my lawn. "Let me back up. I'm Nolan Pierce, quiet analyst by trade, hobby woodworker on weekends, and loud coffee drinker at volumes my neighbors probably deem socially unacceptable. I moved into Cedar Crest Meadows for 2 specific reasons: the tall, mature trees, and the promise of what the brochure advertised as discreet community living. Instead, I got Trisha Malaloy. Trisha is the HOA president, a woman who wears visors like their battle helmets and wields her clipboard like a traffic one infused with legal authority. She has opinions about mailbox heights, trash bin timetables, and even which shade of beige is morally acceptable for front doors. Her teenage son, Brandon, leads a little biker gang of middle schoolers who treat our cul-de-sac like a BMX stunt arena. Bikes everywhere, shortcut paths carved across every yard in the vicinity. They used my side yard as a through route at least 3 times a day, flattening flower beds and leaving tire tracks etched into the grass. So I did what any rational homeowner would do. I installed a handsome cedar side gate to keep the horde from treating my yard like their personal shortcut. I matched the fence, used solid hardware, and stained it to blend with my house. Trisha called it hostile architecture. I called it a gate. Then came the notes. Little printed cards were tucked onto my door handle, complete with official-looking HOA letterhead. "Gates discourage community flow," one declared, as though my yard were a public sidewalk. Next came the fines. Unneighborly access reduction $50. Visual obstinacy $75. Unauthorized latch 100. I wish I were exaggerating. Each citation arrived with Trisha's looping signature and a payment deadline aggressively highlighted in neon yellow. She even leaned into my open garage one day to lecture me about porous yards and neighborhood connectivity. She used terms like circulation patterns and pedestrian easements with the confidence of someone who'd watched exactly one city planning documentary. Then, she took the campaign online on the neighborhood forum. She posted with the subtlety of a foghorn, "Some people have decided to lock their gates," followed by a loaded, "Thoughts? Opinions varied." But Trisha screenshotted only the supportive comments, printed them, and left them on my windshield like parking citations. Meanwhile, Brandon began treating the latch like a puzzle challenge, yanking and jiggling it repeatedly. I eventually found tally marks scratched into my fence in Sharpie. 14 marks. 14 attempts to open my locked gate. Trisha herself showed up one afternoon with a yardstick, measuring the gate with absurd precision before announcing it was 1 inch to freedom negative. When I asked what that meant, she said I'd understand when the fine arrived. I emailed her the architectural committee approval I had received before installation, complete with photos from 3 angles. She replied almost instantly, "Approvals can be spiritually revoked." I reread that sentence 5 times, searching for sarcasm. There was none. Saturday afternoon, everything erupted. The boys barreled down the hill on their bikes, heading straight for my side yard as if it were a bowling lane. I was in the garage sorting tools when I heard the sudden skid. The gate was shut. Brandon discovered the lock and performed what looked like a dramatic Shakespearean gasp. He rattled the gate with growing frustration, before yanking out his phone and dialing 911 to report what he called illegal blocking of a public passageway. I could hear every word. Yes, it's an emergency, he insisted. He won't let us through. The dispatcher asked, through what? Through his gate, Brandon said, as though the logic were self-evident. Moments later, Trisha arrived breathless, pointing dramatically, waving a wrinkled photocopy of something she claimed was a walking path from 1998, a path that, notably, was never actually built. She insisted my gate had seized community land and that my yard was technically an easement. She was so sure of herself, tapping the photocopy like it was some lost constitutional amendment. The officer asked for documentation proving the easement. Trisha said she had community memory and historical precedent. The officer looked at me. I shrugged. Then Trisha slipped badly. She admitted, right in front of the officer, that she had tested the lock 3 different times that week to verify the obstruction, which explained the fresh scratches around the latch that I'd been puzzling over. The officer asked whether she had attempted to open a locked gate on someone else's property. Trisha insisted it wasn't someone else's property at all. It was community adjacent. Those were her exact words. Community adjacent. I'm a private man, but I'm not defenseless. I excused myself, walked calmly into my office, and returned with receipts. Not metaphorical receipts, actual, physical evidence. The recorded plat map, showing my property boundaries in crisp black ink, was stamped and signed by the county recorder. My survey, with the corner pin still in the ground, was completed only 8 months earlier when I bought the house. The HOA bylaws, highlighted in yellow, with the section clearly stating that owners may install and secure fencing within their property lines. And the ARC approval form, stamped in red with the word approved, bearing none other than Trisha's own signature. Dated 6 weeks prior, the patrol sergeant radioed county zoning while Trisha stood there insisting they consult historical maps. Zoning responded by text within minutes. No easement on lot 42. Property lines confirmed as recorded. Then I opened my Ring camera app. The officer leaned over to watch. There was Trisha, 3 days earlier, lifting my latch with a butter knife as she tried to figure out the locking mechanism. There was Brandon, 2 days ago, yanking on the gate so hard the hinges groaned and the entire fence rattled. And then, in glorious HD from the previous afternoon, Trisha was whispering to her son while gesturing at the gate. The officer asked me to turn up the volume. If it breaks, Trisha said on camera, it was loose. We just found it that way. The officer's eyebrows tried to escape his face. He asked Trisha if she wished to revise her statement. Trisha claimed the camera angle was misleading. 2 weeks later, Cedar Crest held a special meeting in the clubhouse. Half the neighborhood came for the drama. The other half came for the Costco cookie trays stacked on the refreshment table. I had requested the meeting formally, submitted my agenda items in writing, and prepared a presentation. Trisha had tried to deny the request, but the board treasurer reminded her that any homeowner could call a special session under the bylaws. She arrived in her sharpest power visor. I presented my case using the clubhouse projector, with slides displayed on the community room wall. Slide 1, the plat map, featuring the mythical walking path clearly labeled, proposed abandoned. 1998, with the zoom in on the note reading never constructed removed from Plan 1999. Slide 2, Bylaws Clause 7.3, explicitly stating gates permitted, locks permitted, owner discretion for security measures. Slide 3, the Ring compilation Trisha advising Brandon on testing access rights, plus every attempted breach, edited into a tight, dramatic 2-minute sequence. The room was silent except for the audio. Slide 4, a letter from the county council politely but firmly clarifying that calling 911 over a locked gate does not constitute an emergency, and may qualify as misuse of emergency services, and that repeated attempts to open a locked gate on private property could be considered attempted trespassing. I had requested this letter after the incident. The county was surprisingly helpful. Slide 5, an itemized list of every fine Trisha had issued, totaling $475, along with my formal request for reimbursement and a written apology. The board's attorney, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, cleared his throat, and began referencing terms like tortious interference, harassment, and abuse of authority. He explained that the HOA could face liability for punishing a homeowner for exercising legal property rights. The vote to rescind my fines passed 7-0. Tricia abstained, claiming prejudice. Then came the real surprise. A motion was introduced to censure Tricia for instructing minors to trespass and to remove her presidency privileges, her key to the common area storage shed, her reserved parking space, and her $100 monthly stipend. Tricia stood, face pale, visor slightly crooked. "But the shed is my office," she protested. The treasurer didn't even look up from his notes. "It stores folding chairs, Tricia." The motion passed 6-1. Only Tricia's best friend voted against it. That night, Tricia lost the presidency. And she gained something new, a civil injunction. After reviewing my evidence, the judge expressed concern about the pattern of behavior and ordered that both Tricia and Brandon must remain 5 feet away from my fence unless explicitly invited. The filing fee alone cost her $300. The HOA issued a formal "respect the gate" policy complete with the diagram, and my latch became the official example in the updated community guidelines delivered to every resident. Brandon now bikes around the cul-de-sac the long way, adding an extra 2 minutes per loop. And as part of his court-ordered community service, he spends weekends repainting the fences. He and his friends tested a full 40 hours. Tricia sat frozen in her folding chair as the board collected her key, her parking placard, and her clipboard, her visor slightly sinking as she stared at the Costco cookie tray she could no longer reach from her new seat in the back.